Hello, you're watching Proactive. I'm joined by Andrew Grove, Managing Director and CEO of Aura Energy. Andrew, great to speak with you today. You're out with an update on your Tiris uranium project in Mauritania, and it looks like you're making good progress as you move towards mine development and that decision early next year.
Yes, thanks, Stephen. Yes, we are. Look, a lot happening on at Tiris at the moment. It's on the back of many years of studies and whatnot. So that delivered a feed study in February this year that showed really strong economics on the project. 17-year mine life, 2 million pounds a year of uranium U3O8 production, NPV of $388 million, IRR 36%, and 2.5-year payback. So it's a good foundation to get the project into development. And since then, we completed a drill program and we've increased the resource base by 55%. Now we're sitting at a resource base of 91 million pounds U3O8, which really gives us a lot more leverage in terms of extending the already long mine life or potentially expanding the production rate in the future. So the key focus on Aura this year is really to getting to a final investment decision at the end of this year or early next year. We previously announced that we've kicked off the funding process. We've engaged Aramco, highly qualified debt arrangers who have got a lot of West African experience and uranium experience, and they're running around now, rounding up all the banks and getting expressions of interest for the sort of structured finance part of the equation. We also announced that we've got Macquarie Bank doing a strategic investor process for potentially looking at maybe bridging the equity gap, or at least filling a large portion of the equity gap with a third-party investor who might like to take a look at an investment at the asset level. And then yesterday, I think we put out even some more activity that we got underway to get us into a position to be able to develop the project. So we've engaged an owners team. We've tested the market out for project managers and groups that specialise in sort of doing the owner team management side of things. So we settled on Project EQ with Jan Boysen, really experienced in West Africa. Him and his team they've hit, they're ready. They've started already. So we've got a whole team basically ready to take this project into development and get us prepared for development. So there's a lot of work to do before that. We also, we've announced that we started the water drilling. So we are in the middle of Sahara Desert for the project. So water is a critical element. We have previously identified water, but this is really testing a very large aquifer about 100 kilometres to the south in the Tuadeni Basin. We're doing a few more economic studies. On the basis of the expanded resource, we'll rerun the mine plan and optimisation. Ideally out of that, we'll see an extended mine life. We'll probably optimise the number of mining units we've got, and that will potentially save capital and OPEX in the future. And we'll also run some scenarios where we can probably take that production rate from the 2 million pounds a year to 3 million pounds sometimes in the future once we get into production. And we also, we're revising our ESG framework. It's very important that we manage the whole ESG framework, particularly the radioactive safety and community relations and environmental side of things in Mauritania. So we're getting some help on that to reframe that and bring it up to date into a more modern framework. So look, there's a lot happening, and we're doing a capital cost review as well with Lycopodium, who just recently successfully completed the restart of Paladin's Langer Heinrich mine in Namibia, and that essentially has the same flow sheet as our Tiris project. So they're really, got relevant recent experience on that flow sheet. So they're going to be a very good help for us as well.
So Andrew, what sort of news flow then should your investors be looking out for the remainder of 2024?
Yeah, so look, there's a lot going on. So there should be a really supportive news flow. Initially we're looking at the results of that mine optimization study. So that should flow out with some updated economics around the feed study and some potential optionality around the expansion. The capital cost reviews and things will come out with hopefully some capital cost reductions. We're well engaged on securing our first offtake with a major US utility, which will give a lot more support for the project, third-party support for the project in the country. We'll see the expressions of interest in the funding exercise as well, which again supports the validity of the project by third parties that are reviewing the project and the jurisdiction at the moment. And I think there'll be a lot more as well on top of that.
Of course, you're off to Mauritania in the coming week, Andrew. In the meantime, you're actually in Sweden, where you're at your Häggån project. So maybe just a quick word on what's happening on the ground at Häggån.
Yeah, look, that's Häggån's. We're in the process of applying for an exploitation permit, and that involves some number of baseline environmental studies and community engagement which we've undertaken. So that we're in preparation for that, which was in about August. So we're getting the documentation for that. But in the background, interestingly, the Swedish government's moving towards lifting the existing uranium mining ban. They undertook an inquiry that the government's working on now. Their intention is, I think, to bring that into the legislative agenda to lift that ban early next year. So we should see some good news about lifting the uranium ban, because Häggån does contain about 800 million pounds of uranium resources in a very large 2.5 billion ton polymetallic project. So there's a lot to do there too.
Seems you're busy on all fronts at the moment, Andrew. I hope you'll keep us posted on any developments. Thank you very much for updating us today.
All right, thank you, Stephen. Appreciate it.
That's Andrew Grove, Managing Director and CEO of Aura Energy.